A2 or bus, and basically what we're working on is we're working on the test scheduling project, environmental test scheduling project for Halliburton. A brief rundown of what it entails is basically you have a couple of different tools that you would like to test, and you have different resources that you would pull this data from. So you would have three levels of users. You would have requesters, managers, and super admins. And basically the requesters would send in these work requests with these tasks that need to be completed. And after that, you would have either an admin who has power to approve or deny any request, or you would have like their immediate work request manager who would have option to deny that as well. So that's pretty much the gist of it. So going on to what we did this week, we kind of separated things a little bit more. We have our front end team, which is Giovanni, Tyler, and Chris Hill, who isn't here right now at the moment, but they went ahead and actually basically went over some of these tasks. So I'll let them explain a little bit more about what they went through.
All right, get ready to pull it up. So I basically worked on the create the task form component. The task form component is the second big component in our project, the first being the work request form. So basically, I wanted to build the bare framework of that, going off of just some mock data that was given to us by our host. Oh, this is old.
Yeah, I'm getting the new one right now.
Okay, sorry, we gotta pull down the old, or the new one. But basically the tasks are part of the work request schedule, which will be queried against the server, and you can basically just view the tasks that are done for each test and each work request. So this is just the generic information that will be submitted with the work request. And then for each task, you can submit files and then add or delete the files, and links can be added. The initial contact is the first contact that's added, but then you can also add more contacts if needed. And then the log entries will be generated with the initial work request, but then you can continue and add more log entries later if needed. But it's, as of right now, we were working on connecting to the back end, so this is just the initial report from the first mock report we got. But hopefully in the next iteration, we'll be able to dynamically generate all of the queries from the server.
So for the work request form, this is where we fill out all the work requests. We didn't change, I guess, front end wise. We just switched from we just had our template forms, and we switched them to reactive forms, which give us the ability to do a little bit like add multiple tasks to the form, and it would just simplify in the future for later implementation of different components.
Yeah, so basically a really big part of this was like we refactored everything, so moving forward it would be a lot easier for us to change fields and like maybe input types without having to break a lot of things as well. So it's basically what reactive forms is they decouple a lot of functionality needed, which is a good thing.
Yeah, you basically write all the fields in TypeScript instead of HTML, and then you reference through HTML. You reference the components that were written in TypeScript. So it allows for dynamic forms creation a lot easier.
One of the other things that we got running was actually the you guys put this. So basically one of the things that we got running was the work request form can actually now submits to our API, and we'll go ahead and create a new one. Or as if you can see in this case, there wasn't actually anything sent, so it will go ahead and tell you, it wasn't successful, so throw out the error. later on moving down the iterations, we plan on making this a little bit easier for the user. That way they know actually what happened. You know, was it maybe the wrong group that they used, or maybe they forgot to fill in a field, which, you know, apart from having the validation that it's already there in place, sometimes it still helps to have that, you know, that friendly reminder. The other thing that we worked on was the admin task, and basically, like I said, there's work request managers and there's admins as well, and they both have the option to go ahead and either approve or deny your task. So this is kind of the format that we're going to be using. We haven't had any task. We haven't implemented the task approval yet. Since it's not talking to our API at the moment, but it's something that we will be putting on for our next iteration. The good thing is that pretty much the most of the work is done at this point. So all we would have to do is make sure that the approve button actually sends the approve API call. And you know, another thing would be to either deny it, so we would add in the button that sends the deny call as well. And I think that's as far as the front end, this is what you would see. The other thing that we talked to our sponsor about, and he gave us feedback on, was that the previous iteration, one of the things that stopped us from making the API call, hooking up the front end to make the API calls, was that we didn't have any API documentation. So if you want to go to that first test is build, elaborate at the top left, right there. Oops, right there. So we went ahead and we actually used Swagger. So we now actually have documentation for this as well. And what it does is it allows everybody who's on the team to, if they change any of the API endpoints to have different parameters that are required or support different functionality, they can directly edit this here. And it's a good source for everyone to go ahead and take a look at. You know, if maybe you're working on the approved tasks, you know, you kind of want to know what your abilities are as far as like, or how you would implement that, right? How would you make that craft that request? So if you click on one of these, just click on that one, it'll actually tell you, you know, this is the URL, the method that you're using, what it does. In this case, it'll update a work request. And at the very bottom, it'll give you just an example of, it'll give you an example of what you should be sending within that request for it to return successful. And then if you scroll a little bit lower, it actually does also give you the option to tell you if the request was successful, it'll tell you exactly what it'll return, which is a 200 item updated successfully. Or if it was, if it failed for whatever reason, in this case, it'll give you a 404, and it'll tell you valid work request ID. So that was one of the cooler things that also we came across this iteration. Hit the back end. So these were the tasks that we had set out for the back end. We pretty much got all of them done this iteration. We got the API documentation, which was our #1 priority, since we wanted everyone to have access to actually getting our functionality rolling out to the user. This was essential. Then we also created the task API endpoints, and we added a new feature. We started the groundwork for the new feature, which is going to be saving our work requests as drafts. So this is one of the use cases for, let's say you're creating a work request, but you don't have all the information you need at that moment. Instead of you having to, give up and just cancel and try some other day, you can actually go ahead and submit this work request as a draft, so that later on you can come back and you can actually start from your last save point. We also we had Chris. He worked on a lot of the status hooks as well. So I don't know if you wanted to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I just made some status hooks basically to automatically add the status request when you submit something, and a timestamp as well. I looked a little bit more into as well validation as well as another teammate for validation of the forms before it actually submits it to the database as well.
That's actually something that our sponsor really liked, because what he wanted to know is how granular the validation can be. MongoDB does provide some, but it's basically just this type. If maybe you have an integer, then it is within a range. But you might want to make sure that the user's not putting in something that might might trigger some errors later on down the road. So we're using those hooks to look for that as well. The last thing that I like to say is that we got all our stuff is Dockerized at this point. So what we do is we actually have Docker Compose that will bring up our stack, and this makes it very easy to deploy. So you can actually scale the application very easily by just specifying the number of instances that you want running. So if I wanted, for example, 10 instances of my my backend API running, I can just update the Docker Compose file, and it'll create 10 instances, 10 containers that are running within the machine. So that was another thing that we went ahead and did. And I think probably the biggest thing that we came across during this iteration, as far as like problems that we had to solve, was just thinking of edge cases. I think the team overall as a whole did a really good job of asking a lot of questions. You know, for example, when we were working on the drafts, we were wondering, you know, well, how are you going to separate the drafts, or how would I request a draft, you know, later on down the road? You know, how would I tell that this is a draft and this one isn't? So that actually, you know, brought up a really good scenario, and it basically prompted us to create that status hook that shows is this something that's pending, or if it's something that's, you know, that's been approved. Another thing was when we were creating the approval functionality for the front end was, you know, is there an option to deny? And that's something that we kind of had brushed aside. We didn't really think about. So that was something we also had to address and make a plan for. So I think that was probably the biggest challenges that we faced across this iteration. That's covered the things going last screen. This is for the front end. Basically, right now we're hovering a little bit lower, I would say, than we would like. This is due to just having a lot of implementations for the that is like with mock data. So we haven't really had a chance to test it with real life data at the moment. But it's still pretty high, I guess, in total. The branches is the only thing that we would have to work on. And this is going to be the back end, the test that we're running at the moment. It looks a little bit low, but what ended up happening is towards the end of the sprint, we actually went ahead and added the boilerplate for our authentication. So a lot of these are going to be, for example, the channels and the log. Those are all tied into the authentication service that we have. And since we're not using it at the moment, we haven't written any test cases for them. But it's something that we do plan on tackling on our next sprint as well.
Thank you. Venkat?
Can you go back to the application and show an integration of the front end with the back end?
Did you guys hear his question? Okay.
So looking at this seems like a lot of information the user is going to enter before they get any sort of validation. Is the validation happening on the client side or the server side?
At the moment, we have both. So if I were to leave, like for example, any of these that have the star, if I were to leave them blank, it will automatically throw up a warning. So it would turn into a bright red to signify, hey, you need to fill this out or else it's not going to work. And then at the very end, whenever you do hit the submit, even if you manage to skip that for some reason, it'll also tell you, at the moment it's just a simple alert box, but it will tell you, hey, there is an error when we're sending this as well.
So if you quickly scroll down on this for a minute, so user has to enter where they can do anything. Can they and then come back and continue filling the order at the later time?
That's something that we're going to be tackling on the next iteration, which is where we're going to have the save as a draft function. So
Okay.
if they don't if maybe they still need to gather some information on for whatever task it is that they're going to request, they can just save that draft and then come back to it at a later time.
Okay, so if you continue further with this, and what happens? What's the next step after this?
If you once you submit it, at this point it'll just create the work request, which will be saved in our MongoDB, and from there it'll go into a pending status, which once we get the admin functionality set up, it will in a real life scenario, the admin functionality would then pull up all the work requests that have that pending status, and they would have the option to approve them.
So right now you can submit for approval at this point.
Should be, yes. And then I think if you go to what did you go to? Okay. Yeah, but it should be this is some of the documents that we created with that functionality being hooked up to it.
At what point will the user be able to see this information on the front end?
Yeah, usually it would be displayed right here underneath the work request info for the work request as a whole, and the individual tasks that are within that work request will also pull in some information if you click on the task. And at the very top, it'll also have the work request information there that's specifically tied to that task as well. It's a little bit complex because the sponsor wanted us to have work requests that have tasks that are requested within that work request as well. So it's a little bit hard. It's a little hard since we have to basically make multiple calls to submit the tasks in their own collection and also submit the work request. And then whenever it comes time to retrieve them, we also have to retrieve those as well.
That's all I have.
Okay, just a simple question. Can you go back to the approve for work or work request page? There was one. Yeah, right there. Approve work request. Right. To the very bottom, there's a approve button. The sponsor ask you to also have a more like a decline button or reject button also. And another question is there are 3 tasks. I don't know what sponsor wants. Does he want either all of them approved simultaneously, or you can partially approve and some partially disapprove?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We may want to talk to him. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.